Thank you, Dr. Shop. And for those of you who are watching this on the webcast, some of the video clips that Dr. Shop mentioned will provide the links as well as the PowerPoint presentation. I know there were a lot of other questions we didn't get to, but Dr. Shop will be here for the next couple of days. So particularly some of the software, some of the efforts that you're working on nationally and internationally, there's clearly a lot of interest in that. So thank you. I'd also like to point out that on Dr. Shop's last slide, Californians are not eligible to apply for any of those jobs. Our next plenary speaker is Patricia Cruse, who is the founding director of the University of California Curation Center at the California Digital Library. In that center, she's developed an emphasis on many things of relevance to this summit, and we're delighted to have her to share her experiences and where the University of California has been going over the last few years. She's really been a pioneer in data sharing, how we create, manage, how individual researchers get credit for sharing data, and how that data should be preserved. She sits on numerous national boards related to these topics, including the Data Site Governing Board, and a particular area of expertise is how you develop business models to support the cyber infrastructure or the data management systems. She's also the co-chair of the National Science Foundation DataOne Sustainability and Governance Working Group. And amongst other things, the California Digital Library, you of course host our online journal, the San Francisco Estuary and Watershed Science Journal. But between the California Digital Library and the Delta Stewardship Council, of course, this is a totally free, open journal that enjoys a very high scientific reputation as well. So, Patricia Cruse, thanks so much for being with us today, and we look forward to your insights.
Sorry. Hi. Just see how this works. Okay, hi. I'm Patricia Cruse, and it is really a pleasure to be here today. Anything that has the word data in it is exciting. Anything that has the word environment and has to do with California is exciting. So what I want to do today is give you just an overview of the data environment and touch on some of the things that were already talked about this morning, and think about why we share data and why that's important. And then think about some of the barriers to sharing data, why people say, oh, it's really hard, I can't do that. And then really quickly, whirlwind tour through some of the things we're doing at the California Digital Library. So a little bit about me. I'm not a scientist, but I'm part of the team. I'm a librarian who works on organizing, managing, preserving, and providing access to information. And so that information can be available for the long term. And one of the things I do is work with researchers, and I work with the University of California researchers, but also researchers around the country. So I'm the director of the UC Curation Center at the California Digital Library, and we serve the UC libraries, but also the University of California as a whole. But we also work with a lot of people around the state and around the country and internationally. To think about how we can support scholarship now and into the future. So let's think about this big data thing. Everybody is talking about big data. It's the new oil, people say. Big data, little data. It's a really hot topic. So what I want to do today is talk about how it relates to science. And you'll see that big data is everywhere. It's in the popular press, and you see different words for it, the power of data, data-intensive research, etc. There's TV shows with data, sports data. That's near and dear to my heart as a baseball fan. And even the president is talking about data, the big data initiative that are coming out, and this is really exciting for many of us. But let's go back in time a little bit and think about, and here I want to talk a little bit about how data has been used throughout time for science. In the early 1600s, Galileo turned his telescope towards the sky, and he labeled each, and in his logbook each night he'd go out and he'd draw to scale schematic diagrams of Jupiter and some oddly lights near Jupiter. And he labeled each drawing with a date. Eventually his observations concluded that the Earth indeed orbited the Sun, just as the Galilean moons were orbiting Jupiter. And his clear and careful record keeping of his data let Galileo understand what support his hypothesis. And because we have this logbook, because we have his record keeping, that is still available to us today to understand how he came to those conclusions. In his logbook, he talked about the data, the drawings of Jupiter and its moons, the metadata, the timing of those observations, and the text, descriptions of his methods and analysis and conclusions. But if we look today at the field notebooks, they're vastly different than what we saw before. The field notebooks are fed by sensor data, all kinds of data coming from various places. There's not that careful analysis and metadata created on the spot. It's just a massive amount of data. So with that massive amount of data, we're in real danger here. Without data management, without proper documentation about what's there, reproducibility and reuse of that data is at risk. It's lost. You might as well throw your research away before you publish it. My colleague Bill Michener several years ago came up with this idea of data entropy, and I think this is a really compelling way to help everybody understand the importance of documenting data. So at the time of publication, when you publish a journal article and you have the data that supports that journal article, you've created all of your figures and graphs, etc., you're pretty well aware of where that data came from. But as time goes on, specific details about when you collected that data, what day was that, which site was I at? Was I in San Francisco Bay? Which wetland was I collecting at? Those all seem to go away. General details then slip away as time goes on. If there's an accident, if you spill water on your laptop or your disk crashes or something like that, the data is lost. With that, if you retire or change careers, you're no longer interested in that, but somebody else might be interested in that. And so if you don't document it, it's lost. Everybody is going to meet their merrymaker someday, and your research will not live beyond you unless you document your data. So I want to talk a little bit about, at the California Digital Library, we have been looking at various publications and surveys and just in conversations with people about why they don't want to share their data. And here's some of the things, and we totally understand that data are scientists' babies. They're special snowflakes. They've worked very hard to collect their data. But here's some of the things that we hear about why people don't want to share their data. The number one thing we hear is people will misinterpret my data. Well, here's a solution for that. Document it so people can interpret that data. Document it can interpret your data the way you want it to be interpreted. My data are too specific and too complicated, and this is that special, the unique snowflake. And I would argue, let others be the judge. You can never anticipate the downstream use of your data. Others will see new things that you haven't seen with your data, and if you document it appropriately, it's not going to be too complicated or too specific. I might want to use it in a research paper, fair enough. Everybody has big ambitions of collecting data and saying, oh, I'm going to publish this, it's going to be perfect. Well, what I would suggest in this case is embargo your data for a year. And after a year's time, if you haven't published that paper, set it free and let others publish that paper and cite you and credit you in their publication. I'm not sure that I own the data or if I have the right to make that data available. If you don't know, ask. I think that this is copyright. It's all very complicated and tiring. But 99.9% of the time, that data can be made available, particularly if it's publicly funded. And finally, I'm busy and I don't have the time, and it's simply not a priority for me. I'm on to other things. Well, I think that there's mandates that are coming down that are going to make it a priority. So we can use these mandates as carrots and sticks to get us to publish our research. So earlier this year, the Borgman and Goodman, Blocker, and Borgman published in PLOS something called 10 Simple Rules for Sharing Your Data. And if you read through these, a lot of these are just simply common sense. But I think there's a lot of really good takeaways here. And some of these were already touched on in the earlier talk. But I think the first one, love your data and let others love it too. And I think that this is really important to think about. Let's create a culture of data sharing and be advocates to change the way that we do our work. Other things like conduct science with a particular level of reuse in mind. Early on in your research, begin to think about how that data can be used by others. Push that documentation and management as far upstream as possible. Link your data to your publications. So when you publish a paper, that's only part of the story. Your data is the other part of the story. And I would argue, and not because I like data, it's the more interesting part of the story. Put those two things together and make that a whole package so people can understand what you're talking about. Publish your code. We were talking earlier about software. If you use scripts in creating your data sets, publish those as well. Make those available no matter how little or small. Use data repositories. Don't rely on emailing spreadsheets to your colleagues. You put it in a public place so other people can use it. And finally, be a booster for data science. And again, changing that community of practice as we enter into that new paradigm of research. Okay, now we get to the sticks, the mandates coming from the funders. And so the first one that was touched on earlier is the National Science Foundation in January 2011 said that investigators are expected to share with others their data, and proposals must include a data management plan. NIH already had this in place, but it was for very large funded materials, and when NSF put this out there, I think in the scientific community and in the library community, there was a little bit of an earthquake saying, wow, some people were really excited about this. Other people were thinking, oh my gosh, now I have to do something else to finish that NSF proposal. Other funding agencies have followed suit along with the private sector. And I think this has been a really positive move of raising the profile of why you need to share your data. More recently is through executive order, et cetera, federal agencies investing in research and development of more than $100 million must have clear and coordinated policies for increasing public access to research products. This is really exciting, and I think as the OSTP, Office of Science and Technical Policy at the White House, this is going to have a huge impact on research and what researchers are doing with their data. Publishers didn't want to be left out of the game. So Nature, Science, and most recently PLOS is requiring authors to share their data. If you publish an article in PLOS, you have to make that data available as well. And again, I think this is a very exciting development. PLOS got a tremendous amount of pushback, which you can read, and it talks a lot of the same arguments that I already shared with you about why you don't want to share your data. But I think it's a positive move, and they feel that it was the right move. But there's some very positive effects of data sharing, as Heather Pivovar and Todd Vision of Dryad at Duke University, they discovered that citation rates increase when you share your data. When you provide all of that information, the fuller package of your research, you'll see an increase in citations. So clearly there's a cultural shift happening, and that's why I think we're all here today is to think about how we can succeed in this new world. But let's do a little bit of a reality check. And I think the ugly truth is that many researchers, if not most researchers, are simply not taught data management. It's when you're told, hey, you need to manage your data, it's like, okay, I'm not quite sure what that means. I'll go to Radio Shack and buy some little drives that I can stick my data on. And people are just not taught data management, and they're not aware of all of these policies that I'm talking about, whether it's a journal publisher or an agency saying that you need to do something. And people don't share data publicly or store it in an archive, and aren't convinced they should share their data. They think of it as an added burden. So at the California Digital Library, in working with researchers and looking at these various mandates that were happening within the community, we realized that that we as librarians, we've long managed research. We've long helped people store and preserve their content. And so we felt that we could help in this situation. Librarians are helpers, and they want to make sure scholarship is available going forward. And so we developed some tools that we think can help others manage and store their data. And so here's kind of the suite of tools that I'm going to talk about. The data management planning tool, which was talked about in the earlier talk. The EasyID service, which is an identifier service. And you see the DataUp tool, which is a tool for managing tabular data and preserving that and making it available. Our merit preservation repository, and then finally DataShare. All of these things are available publicly. Anybody can use them, and I can talk to you a little bit more about that offline. So just going back to data management and mandates coming down from journals and funders, and more recently the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So just what is a data management plan? And we talked a little bit about this earlier. It's a document that describes what you will do with your data during your research and after you complete your project. So it's during and after. So we developed something called the Data Management Planning Tool. And this we just launched the new version of the tool on May 29th, last week I think that was, which allows people to create data management plans, and you can customize this tool for your institution and link to resources, and there's help text and to help you create your own data management plan, suggested answers to questions, suggested answers, not that you should copy. Training materials, so if you want to do some data management training, we've supplied a lot of those training materials, as well as news and events related to data management. So the funder requirements. What we've done is go out and constantly are looking at what funders are saying need to be in a data management plan. And we've taken all of those requirements and put those in our tool and saying the National Science Foundation bio is saying this is what your data management plan needs to look like, or NIH is saying this, or NEH, name your funder or foundation. We've also are collecting a library of public data management plans that you can use and look at and understand how other people, for better or worse, are saying are going to manage their data. And also a large number of data management resources. So this is what the tool itself looks like. So this is NSF atmospheric and geospatial sciences. Again, we've looked at what they're saying. We've included that text in the tools. We've included help saying, think about this, and then you answer the questions. At the end, you say, okay, I'm ready for my data management plan, your 2-page data management plan, which then can be submitted along with your grant. The tool is free and open for anybody to use, and it's hosted by the CDL, and the code is available if anybody wants to use it. It's well documented, and it supports the major funding agencies, and as I said, the new version was released May 29th. And the nice thing about the new version, if you're not a funder or you just simply want to create data management requirements for your institution, you can use the tool to do that, just to say, here's what we think our data and then when you log in, those templates will appear for you. So it's a very easy to use tool. The next thing I want to talk about is EasyID, persistent identifiers. And I think that persistent identifiers, if you use persistent identifiers with your data sets, magic can happen. Those data sets can be persistently available. You can link to that data. You can include it in your NSF biosketch. Here's my data with that persistent identifier, whether it's a DOI, which many of you are probably familiar with you see on your when you're reading journal articles, and this is DOI for data sets. Then you can use that persistent identifier to link from traditional literature to your data. And as I was saying, put those things together to give readers a full information about your research. And then with that persistent identifier, it's exposed to indexing services. It can be made, it's available via Google, and that discoverability becomes so much easier with those kinds of tools. EasyID allows you to create those identifiers and manage those identifiers and then resolve them. So benefits: get credit for your research, meet funders' data sharing requirements, and promote scientific reuse. So here's how it works. Here's the EasyID screen, and those two little things up there in red are create your identifier or manage your identifier. When you create your identifier, it looks like this. You fill out some basic metadata. You tell me where your data set is. In this case, it's the data sets in Dryad. If you look directly above that, you'll see that DOI. We go to the Dryad repository, and there's that DOI in the Dryad repository. Magic. If you're looking at a journal article, and then you look at the references, here's that citation for that data set in that journal article. And then finally, if you search Google, you can find that data set in Google. So again, this doesn't have to necessarily be associated with a journal article, but your data set can live on its own and be discoverable being via Google, etc. Backing up, some of our services is our merit preservation repository, and it's no prescriptive requirements. You can put any kind of information in our repository. We have strong versioning, so if you change your data set, you can update it in the merit repository. As was talked about earlier, data sets do change over time, but I think there might be good reason to say at a particular point in time, this is what that data set looked like, and give information in the next version of the data set what changed, to let people make their own decisions about it. The data are stored at UCLA and the San Diego Supercomputer Center. We have copies all over the place, and it's integrated with the EasyID service and also with DataOne, which I'll talk about in a minute. So as was stated, I'm part of the DataOne project that is really working to provide access to Earth data. And there's three components of DataOne. And the first is about building community and changing communities of practice, of helping people understand how they need to manage their data, training new scientists and old scientists about some of the new things that they need to do in this new world. We also are developing sustainable data discovery and interoperability services, as well as tools. Cyber infrastructure is the backbone of DataOne, and it's made up of coordinating nodes and member nodes. So coordinating nodes are the top level infrastructure that talks to the various member nodes. Member nodes are data repositories and data archives, and as you'll see on there, UC3 Merit, our repository, is one of the member nodes of DataOne, along with a host of other member nodes. So this is how it looks. So we work with ICE at UC Davis, the Information Center for the Environment, and ICE collects water data, and that's deposited in our Merit repository. We then expose that to DataOne, and then it becomes discoverable and gets all of the bells and whistles through the DataOne system. DataOne users can then access the ICE data directly through the DataOne repository. The next thing I want to talk about is something called DataUp, and it's a service for tabular data. And back in 2010, we thought that it was really important to intercept researchers where they already work and not invent new solutions that, oh yeah, I have to learn something new. We did some research to understand the use of Excel by researchers, and mostly earth science, environmental science researchers. And we found that 80% use Excel every day or almost every day. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. You know, people might not want to admit they use Excel, but people use it all the time. And when we asked, what do you use it for? They use it for organizing data and sharing data were the two biggest things that they use it for. So we thought, you know, that Excel isn't often so friendly for sharing and archiving data, but it's something that's very widely used. So with funding from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and Microsoft Research, and more recently from the National Science Foundation, we developed a tool that allows people to deposit their tabular data and make it available in the cloud. So the first thing is upload and post your data, and this is simply drag and drop, and you then say which repository you want to post it to. You fill out some very simple metadata, and this is data site metadata, just very simple descriptive metadata. And then we do a best practices check. And so one of the things when you're using Excel data, people often color code to say this to describe your data, or they'll put 3 tables on one page. This is not good data management practice. And so in the best practices check, we've tried to help people understand what good data management practice is. And then you post it to the repository, and you get a citation, that persistent identifier, a DOI, which allows you to share your data with others and make it available. The last thing I want to talk about is something called DataShare. And this is a project that we're working on with the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF. And the goal is to catalyze widespread research data sharing and develop a system that lowers the barriers to data sharing. And one of the things we found is, as with the DataUp project, is simply finding a repository to use and then figuring out how to use it is really, really difficult. The private sector is really good at this. At things like Figshare, where you just drag and drop your files and add some simple metadata, are very easy to use. We wanted something that was in the public sector and that would keep data in the public sector and made useful by the University of California. So we developed something called DataShare. There's 2 sides to DataShare. You can discover data and share data, DataShare. So the first part is the sharing data, where you can deposit your data, and there's really 4 easy steps to doing that. And throughout, we kind of have help guides and tips that will allow people to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. The first thing is to describe your data set, and this is very similar to the DataUp project. And so very simple, and then you then you upload your data through drag and drop or browse. Again, very, very simple approach. And then once your data is made available, you can discover and browse that data. And so this is I apologize, this is, I discovered this morning, this is an old slide with some junk data when we were doing development, and this is not the real data. So our next step with this is we're going to have a data share for each of the UC campuses. So it'll be UC Berkeley DataShare, UC Davis DataShare, et cetera, so people can then begin to share their data publicly. And so then once you get to a record, you can download that data set, or you can get a citation for that data set, and you're on your way. So again, this is really thinking about developing very simple tools to kind of take those baby steps towards data sharing. So in summary, good data management practice is critical to research, and hopefully I've convinced you of that what you do today to manage your data will make your research available into the future and help others use it in further science. And we think it's really important to engage with the research community early in the data lifecycle. Don't wait till you're at the end of a project to say, oh, I need to manage all my data and to document it. I don't want to say it's too late, but it's going to be a lot harder and take a lot more time. Think about some of those things that you need to do up front. And from our approach is to start small and provide simple solutions that build up and solve more complex problems. So again, these are baby steps, but I think together, by getting those persistent identifiers to putting your data in a repository and describing it is a first step in that. So speaking to a team approach and science being a team sport, I think that's really true. No single entity has all of the capacity to respond to all of the demands that we're seeing today. It's not just the library, it's not just a researcher, it's not your data center informatics people, it's everybody coming together and collaborating. And I think that's one of the fun parts of working, this kind of work, is that the opportunity to meet and hear new people and do good work. So that's me. You can drop me a line at my email or through UC3. You can look at our website and see some of the things that we're doing. We're available on Twitter, but we also have a blog that we have kind of chatty items about data sharing and data-intensive research that we invite all of you to read. So if there's any questions.